Hi, this is Derek Roberti, and welcome to the Power Up MasterClass series brought to you by Cognigy. Today's topic is going to be how to achieve next generation customer self-service. As I mentioned, I'm VP of Technology at Cognigy. I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by Brian Cantor from CCW and Sheila McGeeSmith, the founder and principal analyst at McGeeSmith Analytics. Brian and Sheila, I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Yes, well, first of all, Derek, an absolute pleasure to be here. This is one of those topics that we've heard the talk, we've heard the hype, we've heard the back and forth, but it's time to deliver action. And citing research for my work as part of the customer management practice, which you may know from our CCW Vegas conference series, you may know from our CCW Digital or Customer Engagement Insider online research hub. We're going to be citing research that shows where self-service has been going wrong, but more importantly, what organizations big and small across all industries can do to make it better. So thrilled to be here, thrilled to be with someone like the illustrious Sheila McGeeSmith here as well. Can't wait for a great discussion. I'll pass it over to Sheila to introduce herself.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Derek. As Brian said, I am also an industry analyst covering the contact center space since 1990. So one of the things that I do bring to this market is that perspective of how things have changed over time and what we can be doing today that is so much better than what we could do back in 1990.
Great. And what you'll learn today is going to be 4 big topic areas that we'll go through in detail. The first is how to identify the biggest CX and EX needs in your organization. Second is how to deploy AI-driven self-service at critical moments in your customer journey. Next, how to prepare your operation for emerging self-service opportunities. And finally, how you can reap the rewards of CX transformation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian to get us started.
Yes, and one of the things I'm most excited about here is that we have an opportunity to not just correct some mistakes, not just get on board with a pressing industry trend and buzzword, but instead truly deliver value for our customers. And that is one of the most essential parts of the self-service conversation. We know it's caught a bad rap at times, right? We know that the IVR has been mocked. We know that FAQ pages haven't always been helpful. And we know that early iteration of bots that we've seen didn't really deliver. We also know that because so many organizations get fixated on the deflection aspect of self-service, they don't truly think about the customer. And it leads to this stigma, this worry that self-service is not necessarily a pro-customer exercise, but instead just about cutting some corners, deflecting some calls, and thinking about short-term operational health. But the truth is, and this is what's so amazing and so powerful about this topic, the truth is that at its core, self-service is a very customer-centric endeavor. And here's why. As you see from the slides on your screen right now, traditional agent-led pathways for success aren't really working for today's ever-demanding on-the-go customer. 60% of customers, according to our research, frequently, this isn't just once in a while, this is frequently endure long wait times when they wait for agents to interact with brands. And the problem is, after all that waiting, all that frustration, when they get there, the service they're getting is not even spectacular. 65% of customers say agents don't know about them, and actually a pretty similar percentage say agents don't care about them. So when you have the people that they're waiting for aren't even that equipped to provide the kind of resolutions they need. You look at that and it's clear that customers quite simply do not want to be reliant on agents. They want self-service. They want an option to do what they need to do on their own terms at their preferred time. But here's where things become a problem. Self-service just has not been viable in the status quo. As you see from the stat right here, only 15% of customers have confidence in a chatbot's ability to solve their problem, which is why the stat right next to it, 77% still expect access to agents for most issues. I'm not just talking about those highly complex, 1 in a million emotional ones, most issues. The same, and so they're waiting for agents for most issues. Those same agents who just a minute ago, I told you, customers don't believe, know, or care about them, and they know they have to wait so long to get there. So clearly, when you think about what customers are going through, there's a huge opportunity for self-service to be not just a way to save money for the business, but a way to deliver for customers. Now, as we go to the next slide here, we also see that there's an agent experience element. We can't forget that right now, employees are drowning in unproductive work. They're unable to connect with customers the way they want to and the way we as businesses need them to. And these are the kind of connections that are not only going to improve customer loyalty, but given the challenging state of the agent experience, when they can have productive conversations, it keeps them engaged. So right now, when we have the majority of agents spending too much time on low value work within their contact center functions, if we can use self-service to alleviate some of those repetitive and stressful tasks, and then arm agents with more ability to connect in a meaningful way with our customers, we're going to see huge benefits as far as agent productivity, agent retention, agent satisfaction, the kinds of things we know are the recipe for a great experience. And then before passing to Sheila, who I know has some great insights here as well, let me bring up a few other points. First of all, there's a brand reputation situation, right? Because if we can deploy better self-service options, we're not only going to make people more confident in our brand's ability to solve their problems, but we're gaining an additional chance to connect with them at key moments of digital truth. So as they're navigating our journeys, going across our websites or our mobile apps, when we have self-service that works, it's a way to build further relationship with them at a time when we don't want to be forgotten. We don't want our customers to go elsewhere. We want them to know that everything they need is right under the window of our business. Now, there's also an intelligence opportunity too, because if you can have conversational self-service on the front lines, you have a chance to truly learn about your customers, things that you're not going to learn from an FAQ page because customers are actually engaging and actually communicating what they want. And there's also a scalability and consistency play here too. I know I kind of chastise or maybe look down upon the pure efficiency aspect, but the truth is, if you do have a sudden support need or need to make a big announcement, self-service is a great framework for doing so efficiently, accurately, compliantly, and ultimately setting your business up for success. So Sheila, that's sort of some background research that we have. What did you want to share from an insight perspective about the need for self-service right now?
So, Brian, what you've been talking about is why we want to improve our self-service, right? I'm going to talk a little bit more about why now. And I think a big part of why now is a post-pandemic effect. Over the past year or so, I've written articles for No Jitter, which is an online resource for contact center and customer experience topics that highlight why now is the time for automation and self-service. So the first article there, AI tackling unemployment. Just as, when the pandemic started, government unemployment offices used to getting, 10, 20,000 calls a month, suddenly faced with millions of citizens filing for unemployment. When one thinks of government, federal, local government, we don't usually think of them as technology innovators. So a lot of these governments, federal and local, were using premises-based contact centers, not very sophisticated artificial intelligence or conversational intelligence. And yet they found that quickly deploying these applications was a solution to their problem. It wasn't an ultimate solution. It was a fast fix. And I think one of the things we'll talk about as we go on is how you have to keep up with applications and how they change as businesses change. But faced with millions of citizens, federal governments, city governments, state governments turn to conversational intelligence. Now, another article that was written on the No Jitter site and posted fairly recently talked about Liberty Mutual, a very established 110-year-old insurance company with, again, thousands of agents working in on-premises solutions, which tend to be more difficult to change, more difficult to innovate on top of. And what Liberty Mutual found was that without changing everything that they had, they were able to pivot quickly during the pandemic and add conversational AI, add that self-service and automation on top of and integrate with their existing premises-based solution. So for those of you who are thinking, well, we're not on a cloud-based contact center system, we're not ready, quote unquote, for conversational AI. Liberty Mutual is a great example of how you can start with conversational AI now and then move it to your cloud-based solution later on. And then finally, maintaining stellar customer experience in a hybrid world. So one of the outcomes of the pandemic was, first we sent our agents home, and now, for the most part, we've let half of them stay at home. But it changes the kinds of tools we need to support those agents. So deciding what interactions to automate is often difficult for businesses. The other thing that you can do instead of completely automate is to enable AI assistance to your agents, right? So instead of just having a chatbot, you have AI in front of an interaction, collecting that information Brian talks about as the low value repetitive work. And then when the call does get to an agent, they're more equipped. All the information has already been collected. I'm going to turn it over to Derek now, who's going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to turn it to Derek later on. Derek is going to talk about Lufthansa, which is a great Cognigy customer who has done a lot of the things that both Brian and I have talked about in the last few minutes. But for now, I'm going to pass it back to Brian.
Yeah, I was getting worried there. I was really excited to jump in and didn't want to cede my time to Derek so early. But the key thing here, and again, and this is a MasterClass series, right? And it is also, we talked about how to elevate self-service. And so throughout today's discussion, we're not just going to be giving you research, painting this bleak picture. We also want to give you some clear action plans for how to achieve the different facets of a self-service rollout. And so first, really starting to understand where it fits into your organization. This is something that you absolutely cannot do unless you understand the top pain points within your journey. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it's broken, you better fix it and you better make it better. And so really understanding exactly where customers are spending too much time, what's frustrating them, what's creating the greatest risk of disengagement or worse, churn and defection to a competitor, you absolutely want to see where that's happening, because that's going to let you know where to deploy bots, but perhaps also where not to deploy bots. It's also going to let you know what the experience should look like. And then, as we'll get into later, things like what you should be measuring and what the overall journey is going to look like. And so this process all begins with understanding where there's pain in your customer journey and what you want to do to make that better.
So after you've decided what you're going to do, then one of the things you want to do is identify why self-service hasn't taken off in the past. And if we go back to IVR applications, we likely saw 5 to 10%, self-service completion. And what we're looking for, obviously, is more than that. And one of the things that I would point to is why it isn't taking off is self-service completion needs to be constantly curated. It's not a set and forget it. When you put in conversational AI, think of it like a live agent. It needs to be trained. It needs to be updated on new solutions, on new customer conditions. So, IVR, conversational AI applications are not set and forget. They too, like live agents, require consistent and constant training and education.
Yeah, when you are trying to determine how your customers identify a good customer experience and then which qualities can be replicated in self-service, I want to walk you through an experience. And think about this in your head, is when you pick up the phone to call customer support, there's these moment-by-moment expectations that you have that either get met or not. In these initial seconds of your journey, you're trying to figure out how is your mental model of what customer service could be maps on to the customer experience you're about to have. So you make a call, you figure out when is it going to pick up. When it does pick up, is it going to be a recording? Is it going to be a person? Is it going to be an IVR? And if it's an IVR, which button do you need to press to actually get in the queue to talk to a person? And then when you do that, you're figuring out how long am I going to wait on hold? And when you do get to an agent, you're wondering, is the agent going to understand me and be able to help me end to end? Well, what's powerful about really good self-service options is they check the box at each step of the process. We can pick up immediately. Instead of making someone memorize an IVR menu, We're letting them express themselves in their own terms, and we're figuring out what they want to do without making them understand our own organizational menu structure. We can then help them through self-service in an end-to-end way. And if the bot does reach its limits, we can hand them over to an agent who has the full context of the conversation that's happened up to that point, the automated conversation, knows who the user is. And so that way, any time that's spent with the agent is very concentrated and productive and focused on solving the caller's problem.
Excellent insights there, Derek. And same with Sheila. And I think some of what Sheila has been talking about sets us up nicely into the number 4 action point here, which is being just as important to look at employee pain points and opportunities. You want to look at where they're not only spending most of their time, but perhaps costing the business results and also dealing with their own frustrations and hits to their satisfaction. I know that we at the high level often say we should be automating boring tasks, but it requires a little bit more nuance than that, because you really want to understand what is weighing on the employee and also which tasks are they doing that is having a negative impact on the business. And additionally, remember, since bots are not replacing agents, but augmenting their performance, you also want to know where and how bots can synergize with and feed agents intelligence, as Sheila mentioned earlier. So understanding what the typical agent needs during an interaction to be successful, and then thinking about how a bot can perhaps provide that necessary information, that's going to be a huge part of alleviating some of these EX pain points and ensuring your team is ready to build those meaningful customer connections. So I want to move on to our second section here, because one of the big things I alluded to earlier was this idea of forced self-service, right? We've all seen it. We've all tried to interact with a brand, just wanted to speak to someone, and you couldn't get away from that bot. That wasn't very helpful. And so when brands start to get dollar signs in their eyes and they get call reduction in their heads, they start put bots everywhere, and it ends up costing customer satisfaction. But here's what the real kicker here. Here's what makes things even more concerning is that the bots that they're forcing on customers and placing everywhere haven't historically been capable of doing everything. Our research shows that 2 of the biggest reasons bots aren't working and why the customer trust level is only 15% is because they're too limited in what they can do and they're not customized. Now, don't get me wrong. No one here is arguing that your bot should be handling all of your most complex and most emotional calls. Obviously, yes, they are going to be better suited for interactions with a degree of complexity that's moderate, a degree of, of solution need that's not going to be over the top. But the key thing here is that customers are not engaging for the sake of getting the same response that they can get just by reading an FAQ page or looking at your instruction manual or watching like a cute little YouTube video. They're doing it because there is some expectation of a resolution, some expectation, more importantly, of an experience that's going to be tailored to their unique phrasing, their way of wording things, and their own customer history and persona. And so knowing that the bot will offer some semblance of this will at least give customers a reason to engage. Now, even if your bot doesn't solve the problem, if customers have confidence that they can try and they know that the effort they put in is going to get them relevant help by escalating them to the correct agent who has the information and who is ready to help them, they're going to be more willing to respect your bots, more willing to engage there. That's going to create vital customer conditioning as well. And so ultimately what we want to be looking at here is what we can do to understand where self-service can fit into the journey to make it so that customers feel that there's extreme amount of value for them and you build their trust. Sheila, you have a phenomenal example that really speaks to a brand that doesn't just force self-service, but instead builds a demand for self-service.
Yes, and that key word, Brian, that you talked about is trust. And how do we build customer trust in conversational AI? That's where marketing and contact center management can step in with education. So trust is built on successful trial, right? And how do we get trial? How do we get consumers to try our conversational AI, our chats that have conversational AI? It has to do with ongoing messaging to customers, which has then them understanding what's coming before they even get to your website, before they even get to your application. As you mentioned, Brian, Erica by Bank of America is a great example of this. And I will tell you, I had this aha moment last night as I was reviewing my notes. Erica is the end of the word America. I never even realized that before. Okay. So now I will always remember what Erica's name is. So Erica is a virtual financial assistant in the Bank of America mobile banking app. How do I know about Erica? As a customer, early on, I started receiving emails about this new digital assistant. It promised to be personalized. It promised to be proactive. It promised to be predictive. I mean, this is a virtual agent I wanted to try. So it was piloted in 2017 and launched in late 2018, all pre-pandemic, right? By the end of 2018, Erica had 6 million users and was handling about 16.5 million interactions. And then the pandemic hit. Bank of America updated Erica to process more than 60,000 phrases and questions related to COVID-19. Think about them. Is my branch open? Is the drive-through open? What hours is anything open? How do I do things, right? Within a year, Erica reported 3 times as many users, 19.5 million, and over 100 million interactions. And according to data from users, 90% efficacy. So consumers said, these are useful answers to the questions that I had. So yeah, how do we build trust? We do it with education, and we do it with that constant updating based on new conditions.
I'm going to talk a little bit about, if you think about a company like Bank of America, or more importantly, if you think about your own company, how do you start off choosing use cases that are going to have high impact for your customers, most importantly, and also for your contact centers? So the most obvious starting point is just choose a use case that's going to automate a repetitive task that doesn't require your agent's thinking or decision-making or human judgment. Every contact center is going to know what are the top 10 reasons why people call in. And when you look at those reasons, figure out, okay, what are our automation candidates? Second point related to that is when you look at those automation candidates, think about things that are going to have the highest measurable impact that are going to benefit your customers and your agents. So it's tempting sometimes when you get started, you want to be incremental with conversational AI, and maybe you'll just choose informational questions and answers. But is that really going to create a measurable difference in your contact center? What we recommend is to say, start with a small number of use cases so you don't have to tackle everything at once, but make sure they're high impact, that really automate an end-to-end business process so your customers can complete a full interaction with your organization without having to get to an agent. Or if they do get to an agent, make that a smooth experience for those cases that really do require the agent's thinking. Finally, remember that this is primarily a customer experience initiative, not an IT initiative. What I mean by that is, in the contact center world, it's been an IT heavy experience to be able to implement contact center applications. And the limits of customer experience have really been designing call flows to make sure calls get routed to the right agents and designing IVR menus. And that's not really a customer experience mentality. The way you want to think about it with conversational AI is you first design a customer interaction. What is the best possible way for customers to express what they want, and the right process to walk them through an experience where they get their problem solved? This is not about re-implementing your IVR menu, but through voice commands. This is really about thinking about a natural language user experience and how that should flow. And when people do have a good experience through this kind of interaction, they're going to tell everyone they know about how smooth and natural feeling the interaction was.
That's huge. I mean, you have Sheila right here telling everyone she knows and everyone in the customer contact universe who's surely tuned in about Erica and the great experience there. And so it really does work. And Derek, phenomenal insights there. Now, moving into the action plan here, I'm a person who hates cliches. I never use them. As you can tell by the fact that my number one advice is map your journey, right? You've never heard that before in customer contact. But the truth is, it's extremely valuable here because you really want to understand you're not going to, speaking of another cliche, boil the ocean, right? You're not going to do everything at one time. You're going to want to identify where self-service can make the biggest impact. And that's going to start by looking at where are customers spending the most time on issues that they don't need to be spending the most time on. And when you can understand that, you can identify, here are the use cases we want to automate. Or let's say you think about it from the other perspective, Where are they having to repeat so much information to an agent where if we were to capture that information right at the jump, they would be able to avoid that problem and progress right to the productive part of the interaction. So understanding everything a customer goes through with a given intention and then figuring out how to deploy self-service at opportune times within that journey, that is going to be the best way for letting you know, here's where we get started and here's where we start to determine what kind of impact self-service will have.
So how do we assess how self-service would improve or maybe even weaken experience at these various touch points that we're talking about? So I'm going to go back to this notion of customer effort. How much effort is being required of the customer? Remember, customer effort is a very strong predictor of customer satisfaction. So both in your conversational AI and in your bot work, don't ask for information that is not easily accessible to the customer. For example, if I'm doing something about insurance or registration of my car, do not ask me for my VIN number. I don't know my VIN number. I've had my car for 14 years. I still don't know my VIN number. Try another parameter that's going to be a lot easier for your customer to understand. So we make self-service difficult if we ask consumers to do things that are beyond their sort of everyday ability to do. So that's one way that we can improve. Think about the effort required for that consumer to complete what you want them to complete.
So when you talk about deploying self-service options, it's a big topic. One of the things that is going to come up in your mind if you've been part of the contact center world and contact center projects is the technical barriers to being able to do anything. If you've been part of a contact center platform rollout or a migration to the cloud, you might be thinking in 12 to 18 month or even 2-year timeframes for a project. Self-service can be quite different from that in terms of how fast you can get something live and how fast you're going to start seeing ROI from it. But to do this, you might need help. So if you work with a vendor who can understand your current technical landscape, they can come up with an approach to conversational AI that's going to harmonize as best as possible with the practical realities of what your current technology stack looks like. So maybe if you've already moved to the cloud or have a really open application, you're going to have a highly integrated experience. But if you're still on-prem, don't have a lot of integration options, you can still have a good side-by-side experience that's going to route conversations from the AI and back to agents in a really seamless way without having to rework how you've done everything in your IVR flows. The next part to think about when you're deploying is how you're going to actually build out those conversations. And this is, again, where you're going to need some expertise. You most likely do not have traditional conversational AI roles in your organization, like a conversation designer or a flow builder. And you may not have experience in thinking about how do I test conversational AI interactions. This is where it's helpful to work with a vendor who can really understand customer experience and how that uniquely applies to automated interactions through conversational AI. So you might need some help here, but don't let these barriers that you might perceive from your past experience set limits on the kind of customer experience you can create.
Yeah, and I think what Derek and Sheila said really weaves together nicely, right? Because Sheila brought up how we sometimes design these bot experiences where we expect totally unreasonable things from the customer that are not intuitive for them, not logical for them, very frustrating for them. Well, if you don't have someone who understands the customer experience leading your technology effort, that's bound to happen, right? And so ensuring that the people who are deciding where the technology is deployed and what it looks like also can empathize with what a customer goes through, that's when you're truly going to have a bot that's successful. Now, I mentioned mapping journeys earlier, right? But it's just as important then to figure out, once you start to deploy these bots, once self-service is taking off, how do you reorchestrate those journeys based on what you're seeing? So ultimately, you want to start to build progressions and flows. If you know that a certain intent is just not realistically going to be solved in your self-service platform, you want to build an intelligent routing process that captures the information you need and then gets them to the agent who can help them as quickly and effortlessly as possible. And so really starting to understand where the bot's working, where it's not, you can then start to decide what happens next. And I know I'm going to leave this last point for Sheila, but just to set up a precursor here, you also want to think about agent preparation, right? Because if you know that the bot is failing here, but working really well here, that's going to have an impact for how you think about what the agent is doing, what they need, and what training you even want to offer. And so, Sheila, anything to add really as far as it relates to getting that agent ready to go?
Absolutely. So when I think about analyzing the impact, two things come to mind. Number one, with easy issues handled via self-service, obviously more difficult questions are coming to agents. The number of supervisors available for escalation is likely going to have to increase. There's just going to be more questions that get escalated. Unless, and this is my preferred option, there's also a program to empower agents to handle more issues directly. Think about the dollar amount of refunds that they're allowed to do without an escalation. If they can decide if a consumer has to return an item versus just keeping it and getting the refund anyway, those kinds of things, you can tell as a consumer when you have an empowered agent. I had a great one on a call yesterday, and I was pleased with the company because I knew that agent didn't have to go and get an okay to do something.
Yeah, and I think that's key because the truth is, remember, if we are adding another element, we are saying you have to start in the bot, then from the customer's perspective, that further transfer from bot to agent, then to supervisor, that's going to be a new source of frustration. We're doing this to make life easier for customers, to get them what they want faster. They already feel like they've moved from one channel or one touch point to another. You need to make sure that that receiving agent is much more prepared to deal with emotionally complex work and also deliver resolutions on the spot because they've put their time in. They just want their answer. They just want the resolution. So absolutely great feedback there. And it's one of those things I often say, be careful what you wish for, right? We always say AI for simple issues, agents for complex ones. Well, we better train our agents, hire our agents, and manage them with the expectation they're going to be doing things that are more complex. And that gets into the last point here, which is our focus of the next section on preparation, really thinking about what this is going to mean from an impact perspective to our overall operation, to our CX, to our EX, and to the way we run our contact centers. And so ultimately, I want to start by looking at some of the factors that are essential for preparing, but sometimes just get overlooked when it comes to building our self-service use cases and deploying properly. First and foremost, there is the ROI component, right? So we might say, hey, we have tons of boring work. We have tons of inbound call volume that we want to reduce. So of course we need a bot, right? But that doesn't tell you what value you should be generating. It doesn't necessarily tell you something that your budget holders, your IT department, your CEO, that they're going to want to hear, because they may say, well, I'm paying my contact center agents to answer these calls and they seem to be doing an okay job. So what do I care? You need to be really demonstrating how by deploying this, it's going to lead to demonstrable gains in metrics that all stakeholders can care about, can understand. And that's really where establishing a clear sense of ROI is important. There's this idea of actually rolling out and iterating your self-service. So one of the things I love that Sheila mentioned earlier was that you almost have to treat your conversational AI tools like an agent. Just like someone on day one is hopefully not going to be as good as someone on day 1,000, the same is true of bots as well. Thinking about how you're going to start them, what are the right kind of interactions at first, and then how through AI training, through refining use cases, through getting more data from your customers, you can make them more effective over time and deploy them in more corners of your business. Now, I'm going to give Sheila a chance to also weigh in on point 3. I know you had some thoughts here, but I also want to think about exactly what that training looks like, right? Because too often, tune your bot, train your bot, design your conversations, we just say these words and we don't really think about what it takes to make that happen. Or we just assume that it's AI, it's cognitive, it's adaptive, it's going to fix everything on its own. And that doesn't work either. And so, Sheila, any thoughts about what organizations can be doing here to actually get this training done?
Yeah, absolutely. Companies like Cognigy and others that have conversational AI technology understand this concern, right? And what they've done, and something Derek has already talked about, is design these no-code and low-code solutions so that flows can be changed much more easily with drag and drop kind of tools that allow perhaps that to be done even in the contact center, to have changes made on the fly even in the contact center, and not requiring AI. But the other part of this is having a team that is used to take the input from a system where consumers failed and then give the correct answer. And what companies are finding is that agents are great sources for this kind of work. So things came out, consumers missed, and it has to be corrected. Great example. I was testing a bot once with a developer, and they said, ask for anything out of the store at this hotel that we were in. And I said, okay, I want a Pellegrino. Well, it failed. The chatbot failed because even though sparkling water was in there, it didn't know that Pellegrino was sparkling water. And so it was easy to go in there and make that change. And that's the kind of a change that an agent could help do, that kind of work, make those kind of changes. So how we train manage bots is when there are failures, we have to have really easy ways to go in there and make them right and keep moving.
Yeah, and just as we're using what the agent is seeing to help train the bot, we also want to look at what the bot is seeing or what the bot is doing to help train and further empower agents. So if you know that when a customer asks a given inquiry in self-service, every single time the answer the bot provides them makes them mad, they drop a curse word into the chat, they're not getting what they're looking for, then you know, okay, you're an agent, this type of interaction will be escalated to you, and you better not say this because we already know it's making the customer upset. So really using what you're gathering from self-service to then redefine the training you offer your employees, redefine the type of workflow they need to be prepared for, and getting to this last bullet, reassessing the kind of metrics that you're going to be holding your agents accountable for. The easiest example here, right, is if we truly get to a point where all those simple repetitive tasks are automated, then, and those are all the ones that really only take 5 seconds to solve, then the ones that are reaching an agent are probably going to be more complex. Yes, we can give them better data, we can train them better, but at the end of the day, there are certain types of interactions that just cannot be resolved in a minute or less. And so knowing that more of these are going to be on the plates of our, whether there are live chat agents, whether there are phone agents, then is saying, okay, average handle time for these interactions will actually have to go up. It doesn't mean we're less efficient. It doesn't mean we're frustrating our customers. It's just the reality of how workflow is being divided. And so getting back to that kind of a full circle moment, we talked about the ROI. Also look at how the metrics you're using to assess the ROI may evolve, may become obsolete, may need to be tweaked as self-service continues to gain a foothold within your organization. As always, we want to move into an action point here and really leave you with not just a bunch of questions on a screen, but also some answers for that. So Sheila, I believe you have the first one to kick things off here.
Right, on pre-implementation. So we talked about educating customers, right, with the Erica example. Education extends to agents, pre-implementation. So agents need to be trained that if a customer is transferred to an agent, or and because they started in the bot and it didn't complete, or worse still, the consumer has to dial in again to reach an agent, agents have to be trained, educated to communicate a positive message about the chatbot experience. Comments like the chatbot is new or the chatbot never works can damage trust irrevocably. So getting agents on board early, part of the pre-implementation plan.
And Derek, I think you may have some insights for the implementation as the resident technology expert here. What would be some recommendations for not only getting the technology work, but also to think about all the factors around the technology?
So when you're thinking about what to implement, the way that you're going to start off is, I talked earlier about how you might identify the use cases, but it's as critical to define how you're going to measure the outcomes. So starting off with saying, here's what we want to change in the contact center or for customers. Here's the experience that we want to create for customers or for our agents. And here's how we're going to measure it coming out the other end. It's going to be really critical. Choosing a sane but ambitious number of use cases to be able to solve for initially is going to be a key part of that, to make sure you're choosing something that is going to have high impact, not just for customers, but also internally So everyone who is familiar with your organization can say, hey, this was a success. And we really want to expand the use cases that we're going after with conversational AI is going to be important. And then reporting up, proving that the business case that you made when you started to deploy conversational AI has been a success is going to be critical.
Yeah, and then finally, once you start to do this and you've mapped everything out correctly, you're assessing the impact, you're really paying careful attention to what this means to your organization, then it's time to keep evolving and keep getting better. We're not doing this, this isn't, I know for many people, self-service is an important goal for your organization, but it's not the end goal for your organization. It is a vehicle for delivering a better customer experience. And so ultimately, you have to look at what launching an effective next generation conversational AI driven self-service platform is going to mean for your overall operation. Everything from, looking at the ways you have to train agents and better prepare them, the workflow adjustments you want to make, as I mentioned earlier, the new ways you want to look at metrics. And yes, on the one hand, maybe they're spending more time on complex work, but on the other hand, if your bot is worth anything, it's capturing a lot of information to feed to the employee. And so while maybe a more complex call, less time wasted asking them to repeat everything, it could still balance out. So really understanding how that's going to impact average handle time, how it's going to impact inbound call volume, how many escalations are going to be necessary. And then also looking for, at the end of the day, is this leading to a better customer experience? Are you resolving more issues on first contact because either the bot is so much more effective that customers are getting what they want in self-service, or because you have so much knowledge about what works and doesn't work, you can get them to an employee right away who can solve their problem on the first point of interaction. Whatever it is, understanding what this means for your journey and then rebuilding based on that, using it as a vehicle for a better CX, that is the heart of what post-implementation is. And frankly, that's the heart of next generation self-service. Let's not do the IVR or the bot for the bot's sake. Let's do it for the customer's sake. Let's do it for the employee's sake. Let's do it for the business's sake. So love the implementation ideas here. And this is a key part of the action plan. So all this sounds great, right? We've talked about what's going wrong. We've talked about what you need to look for. We've given some guidance on how to not only get started, but keep evolving over time. But we could just be up here telling you great ideas that sound amazing in theory. They mean nothing to you if you don't know that they can drive success. And so as we get to this last section, Derek, I want to give you a chance to really walk through some examples of what success looks like across both the self-service use cases, really, as well as the entire CX.
Yeah, happy to do that. And walking you through just briefly a few case studies, these don't just highlight, here's some companies who have been successful with conversational AI. They highlight how the overall uncertainty in the marketplace of how customers can interact with with businesses and with government is really driving a lot of this adoption. So E.ON is one of the largest and most well-known energy networks and infrastructure providers in Europe. They've got 75,000 employees and over 50 million customers. Well, if you think about the climate that we're in right now, people are going to have to interact with their energy companies more and more as bills go up and the dynamics of the energy market change. So what E.ON saw that they needed to do was they had already invested in conversational AI, but they needed a platform that would let them orchestrate all of their bots and accelerate how fast that they could deploy bots. So E.ON has a portfolio of more than 30 conversational AI solutions. And before using Cognigy, they were relying on developers to build out all of the chatbots that they have. What's happened now, using a low-code platform, they're able to build and deploy automated AI-driven conversations quickly without having to lean on their most technical talent all the time. So now with Cognigy, E.ON handles 100,000 bot conversations per month, and it's only growing. Now, mobilely, think about the communication side of things. We're all connected, and being able to stay connected is critical with us. It's also a highly competitive market. Mobilely is one of the largest wireless networks that provides coverage in Saudi Arabia. And interestingly, it's one of the largest data center systems worldwide. And when they were looking at conversational AI, they're really looking to change the customer experience. They wanted to significantly reduce wait times. When people called, they had to wait up to 20 minutes to be able to get through to talk to somebody. They wanted to broaden the range of channels for communication. So not just having to handle everything through a call to the contact center. And finally, they wanted to bring a lot of automation to the forefront. Let's help people end to end through customer service experiences that can be fully automated, fully self-service. With conversational AI, as they've implemented it, customers can do a lot now without having to interact with an agent. They can do things like get billing information, check their balance, see what their data usage is. They can add products, they can change their subscriptions, they can make payments, they could recharge their credits using Apple Pay. And they made these self-service options available to their 1.2 million customers over social channels too, including Twitter, WhatsApp, and Apple Business Chat. They've really revolutionized the customer experience. Imagine it, if you're used to calling in and waiting 20 minutes, and now you can solve everything within seconds. That's a huge change and a huge value for your customers. And finally, Lufthansa, and kind of taking a step back, the airline industry in general captures a lot of the challenges that we've had over the past few years. A few years ago, we saw a huge decline in revenues for the entire airline industry as we were facing how to adapt to the pandemic. And that decline in revenues was happening simultaneously with an increase in the number of customer contacts for a number of different scenarios that we never had to handle before. So there are lots of contacts that were around flight changes, flight cancellations in both ways, customers canceling and airlines canceling. And while these were problems that had been solved before, they were never solved at the same volume as we saw in the pandemic. Customers also had questions about what are travel restrictions, what are testing requirements, what are new visa requirements that might be in place as I travel from country to country. What Lufthansa saw is they had to scale quickly. And to do this and to meet kind of this immediate problem at hand, they chose Cognigy as their conversational AI platform because of that ability to build out conversations quickly, to iterate quickly, to add new capabilities quickly, and to analyze how those users are interacting with the bots and what the effectiveness of the bots are. So today, tens of thousands of customers a day and over 1 million conversations per year rely on Lufthansa's virtual agents. It's made a huge difference for them as a business and for their customers.
Great, Derek. So we're going to do a wrap up here and do some key takeaways, each of us, Sheila, Brian, Derek, and I. And I'm going to kick off here. Think about implementing conversational AI for key use cases as not the final step. It's the first step. The tools for customer experience automation are what you have really deployed. Every business is in some phase of digitally transforming, either just beginning, in the middle of that, or just constantly keeping up with the changing digital landscape. Your contact center should be constantly changing as well to meet the demands of that changing business. And now you'll have the tools to change with it.
And what I like to mention as my takeaway is that think about the customer experience first and have all of those downstream technical decisions be driven from that focus on the customer. And this is a little different from traditional collaboration between IT and the contact center. Both of these groups have had, I would say, a good working relationship, knowing their dependence on each other and the need to get buy-in from each other to be able to implement new technologies. And that's still going to be true for conversational AI. But the difference here is we're really thinking about creatively, what should the customer experience be? What should really happen that's intuitive to the customer when they call in? You design that experience first and make sure that all of those downstream decisions are aligned with that starting goal.
Yeah, and what Derek said filters nicely into my takeaway here, which is at the end of the day, yes, self-service should lead to a reduction in call count. It should lead to huge increases in scalability and operational efficiency. But when you're making the investments and when you're starting to deploy it, remember, it is not about deflecting. It is not providing an experience that's good enough for people who really wanted to talk to someone to not totally hate your brand. Instead, it's about adding value to the customer's experience, adding value to the employee's workday. When I think of my best bot experiences, and yes, I know I've been negative at times, but there are some that I really liked, it was because they did something that I could not get elsewhere. It It was easier. It was more valuable. It was more relevant, whatever it is. It made my experience better. And in turn, made me more faithful and loyal to and more of an advocate for that brand. That is the key. Use self-service to add value, not to make up for the fact that you're not doing as well as you could.
All right, well, I'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much for attending MasterClass 1 in our Power Up MasterClass series. There's more to come, and you'll be getting information on that soon. Thank you, Brian and Sheila, for joining, and thanks to everyone else for attending.